Okay, I'm gonna go in for a second.
Okay, good to go? All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
As for who I am, you may know me under a few different names. I started self-publishing in 2012 under the pen name Moira Katzen. I was at that time working in finance. I could not publish under my legal name. I needed people to be... Okay. Your microphone? I'm just gonna wait for the door to close. Get background noise out. Thank you. I started publishing in 2012. I needed to use a pen name at that time. In 2015, I was able to parlay my success from the Light Shadow series into a ghostwriting job. I had graduated right into the 2009 recession. I didn't really want to be in finance. I could leave, I could freelance. It was delightful. In 2016, I connected with someone named Michael Anderle, who had a lot of spin-offs that people were asking for in his world. And we connected about that. I read some of his work. I ended up doing several of the spin-offs. Bellatrix was one of them. The Vigilante Chronicles, Barnabas' story, Stephen and Jennifer's story, a few others. And so he asked me, I talked to him a little bit ago, and he said, we don't have anyone working on contract writing and ghostwriting, so here I am. If you are saying to yourself, Philippa Werner, that sounds like a name I know from somewhere else, I'm also here as a representative of Scribe Count. So if you thought you saw me at a vendor table, you did. But this one is about ghostwriting. A quick note on terminology. I am just going to say ghostwriting instead of ghostwriting and contract writing. Most of the time, it'll get mixed up. Feel free to ask for quick clarification. And I am hoping to do as well a Q&A session at the end of this. And for those of you who are open to it, a little bit of a mixer between this and at the end of this and then before the next session. There's a whole bunch of people in this room who are interested in hiring ghostwriters, a whole bunch of people who are interested in being ghostwriters. You should all meet each other. So, I'm just gonna put that out there. So, I wanna start with what ghostwriting has done for me. I'm speaking as someone who does ghostwriting and contract writing and is also now working on the other side of that with other ghostwriters and contract writers. So this will be helpful for people on both sides of that divide. First of all, my writing toolkit has leapt ahead by crazy amounts. I take immense pride in turning out a book or a series that devoted fans will find indistinguishable from my client's work. That means sentence structure, it means chapter structure, it means plot structure, it means working closely with the client, writing to spec, often writing quickly. We're all indie authors and we have a quick release schedule. It means doing things right the first time. I have gotten so much better in my own work at outlining, at using all of those different voices and tips and tricks I have picked up. It has been invaluable. It has also been wonderful for readers and for other authors. There are 10 entire series that are out in this world that fellow authors desperately wanted to have out there, that readers wanted to read, that have made a difference to people. We don't have time to write all of the things we want to write. We don't. And a good ghostwriter or co-writer, contract writer can help you with that. One client was able to tell his grandparents' love stories. Another was able to test the waters for a subgenre switch. You can do all sorts of things with contract writing. On a personal note, I was able to leave a job that had put me in the hospital twice. When I took another job that I desperately wanted to do in a field that I felt very called to, analytics for an organization I cared about, and several months into it, There were bosses throwing things at us in meetings, berating us, reducing my coworkers to tears. I was able to walk out of that meeting, go back to my office, and print a resignation letter because I knew I could come back to being a writer. I didn't have to put up with that. I have also turned down writing jobs. I've turned down writing jobs that didn't match my interests, that I didn't feel able to do ethically for a variety of reasons. That's something that I'll come back to. And that weren't going to match what I needed from pay. I can do that. It's wonderful. I'm not gonna say freelancing is easy, but you can make of it what you want. So this leads to an incredibly important point if you are hiring and if you are writing. You will need to find out where your boundaries are, and you will only find them by going up to them or stepping across them on certain jobs. Some of them are ethical, some of them are not. I, for instance, have found out that I am happy co-writing and being credited when I come in partway through a series, if the readers know that someone else is working with the author. Otherwise, it does not work for me to drop in mid-series. There's something about the entire arc of the series that I can't do coming in midway. There was a nonfiction book that I was asked to write, a memoir from an ethnic group that I am not part of. I did not feel comfortable doing that. There have been times that people have asked me to do jobs at a quarter or a tenth of my going rate, and I've been able to say, I can't do that. Here's the thing. When I found those boundaries, my ability to pitch to clients and the amount of jobs I got went through the roof. Knowing where your boundaries are, knowing what you are good at, knowing what you want to do is a very good sign for those of you who are considering pitching as ghostwriters. It tells people that you know what you're doing and they are getting a known quantity. This also leads to networking opportunities, and I want everyone in this room to be very cognizant of that. Because of the nature of ghostwriting specifically, not just contract writing, but ghostwriting, almost all of your resume will be word of mouth. And that goes for both people hiring and people writing. Be aware of that. We are happy to pass on other clients and other writers to people when there are jobs we don't have time to take, when there are jobs in subgenres we're not good at. We are also not shy about telling people it was a nightmare working with this person. Just putting that out there. And I'm also going to say this, every job opportunity in any part of the indie sphere that I've been a part of, up to and including Scribe Count, I have fallen bass backwards into by being nice to someone or offering help to someone. This is one of the most helpful groups of people I have ever been a part of. That works wonderfully for all of this. If you're thinking, I can't afford to say no to this job, I can't afford to have good boundaries here, you can. You do not want to have this burn you out. You want this to augment your writing, not diminish it. And if you find yourself going there, draw those boundaries and listen to yourself, because it is no good to anyone if you aren't healthy. And remember, I say that as a workaholic who's multiple times gone into the hospital for that, so don't make my mistakes. So I'm gonna do an overview here of the logistics of what I've found make for a good co-writing or ghostwriting project. I will break out the general principle and then use my specifics as an illustration. Obviously, this may vary for some of you. Pay. Be honest. Be upfront. For those of you who are considering ghostwriting, for whatever reason, anyone who uses the phrase highest quality in a job posting, they don't want to pay you. They want to pay you pennies. I have no idea why that is. but it does not fail. It is one of the things that now always makes my hackles go up. I don't think I want to apply to that one. What you'll want is you'll want to hash out early what amount of control you want to hand off to your writer, or you want to have as a writer. I've had authors say, I want to test the waters in Civil War romance. Write me a 3-book Civil War romance series. That's the brief, that's it. And I've had writers come to me and say, for instance, like Michael, we're gonna be working on this together because this is a series that has a whole bunch of tie-ins to mine. There are things that need to be there. I need to write some of the dialogue for this one character, or we're gonna trade off scenes. It runs the whole gamut. You will want to both provide and, if you are the client, or ask for, if you are the writer, any reference work so that you can get a feel for how their writing flows and what they want from you. What I do in terms of setting expectations early and often, because I hate rework with a passion, is I will send a blurb and a quartile breakout very early. Once they've approved that, I will send a full chapter outline, no matter how much control they have asked me to take. Sometimes you don't know about things you have wanted from a series until you see something else in that place. So it's just always good to send that out and let the client come back to you and say, actually, that's not resonating with me. Better than after you have written the whole damn thing. Also, I apologize, I use foul language a lot. It's probably not a surprise given that I work with Michael Anderle, but then I send the first few chapters. That's making sure that I'm nailing the voice. Again, I don't want to leap ahead, even if they have said, just do this and come back to me. I want to make sure they are happy. After that, you set the chapters as agreed upon. Some people only want the finished draft. Some people want chapters at the end of each writing day. Whatever it is, wait for edits. And here's where one of the emotional parts comes in. Approach edits in good faith and good spirit. The client is the arbiter of this. And, unfortunately, but also fortunately, I made a series of very costly mistakes in one of my latest projects, which are going to be a wonderful illustration here. I had worked with this client before, so we knew each other very well. They knew the quality of my work, and so neither of us stopped to consider that I was not super enthused about this project. We worked together, we knew our pay matched, we knew our writing styles matched. I sent an incomplete outline because we'd worked together before, we knew how I wrote. I took notes that the client sent back early on as, okay, I'll go back and fix that, and I'll just be aware of that going forward. Instead of going back, fixing them then, and making sure the foundation was stable. The result was 3 months of extra work on my part. The client did not have the book finished when they wanted the book finished. I spent 3 months that I should have been bringing in other money from my family, reworking that project. Did I think the changes that I had made to the brief I was given were good? Yes. Did that matter? No, it did not. It was not the client's vision. And my boundaries as a writer for myself meant that I was not going to give that client subpar work. Subpar work was anything that was not their vision. I needed to go back. It pissed me off on a lot of levels, but the biggest one was that I knew better. I knew way better than what I had done. After a few jobs, you will be tempted to start flying by the seat of your pants. Do not do that. Just think back to this. Think back to those 3 months and just say, all right, Pip already tested the waters with that one, not worth it. Not worth it. Luckily, a day or so later, I realized that is going to be a very good illustration at 20 bucks. So here we are. But one of the things this leads to is the emotions. For whatever reason, it doesn't bother me in the slightest not to be credited. It doesn't. I've had a lot of questions about this. I can see where they're coming from. It makes sense to me that I would. It doesn't bother me. It may bother you, and that is fine. That may mean that you want to seek out contract writing or co-writing, things like writing in other people's worlds where they're doing a royalty split or they're doing a pay per word and you're getting your name out there that way. That's perfectly fine. It may be something that you, as someone who is hiring a contract writer, you don't feel comfortable taking credit for someone else's work. That's also perfectly fine. Again, this is a boundaries issue. As Michael said, we are all climbing our own mountain. We are all searching for our own treasure. No one can tell you what that treasure is or where your boundaries lie except you, and your business will not flourish unless you are doing something that is sustainable to you on a gut emotional level. Otherwise, it will drain you dry. It will help you seek out other jobs. It will help you pitch. All sorts of things will fall into place when you start working to the best of your ability in your lane and in the areas you want to work in. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to talk about any questions people have. It is very rare that there's a group of people that can ask questions of each other about contract writing. And it's very rare that people have the opportunity to see one another. It's usually word of mouth. It's usually if you happen to be on the right message board or Facebook group at the right time and see the post, which you can make it work, but it's really inefficient. So I would like people to be able to meet each other while they're here and ask questions of me and of each other while you're here. So, are there any questions? Any illustrations? Yes. Could I have you come up and stand next to the iPad?
Sure.
So that people watching can, yes.
To see me?
No, they don't need to see you, it's just to get your voice in there.
Yep, sure. As far as editing goes, after you've done the first draft or however many drafts, I mean, how far do you take it? What are the expectations? Do they expect, 18 rounds of editing all the way to proofreading? Where do you sort of draw that line?
Okay, so part of that is I draw my own line in the sand on that in some ways, but that will be a by contract thing. There are some people who say, I've got my editing team, you're just going to work with them. You're gonna shoot it through their process. They're the ones who are going to fix any rough edges. You're done once you have the words and I've signed off.
Gotcha.
And said it's good enough to go to my editors.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people who are going to want you to do revisions. I draw the line at one round of major revisions and pretty much unlimited rounds of scene tweaking, but I will probably not work with a client who asks for more than 5 or so rounds of those, because among other things, it means that we're not having a meeting of the minds, and that's just not good.
Gotcha.
But yes, that will vary, and that is definitely an expectation to
Gotcha.
set.
But it's something you should absolutely talk about way at the
Yes.
beginning, put in a contract, stick to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Contracts are very good. The adage is, if you don't have enough money for a lawyer, you don't have enough money not to have a lawyer. It is very true.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
Well,
Hello.
I just want to ask, what are the kind of range of rates for ghostwriting?
Okay. So if you go on someplace like Upwork, you're
Yeah.
usually going to find people asking for people to write for between a half a cent and a cent per word. I have found that when I was pitching at that rate, it was almost impossible to get jobs. I now write between 6 and 10 cents per word.
Okay.
So, and yes, my pitch success has gone way up since I've gone to people and been like, I know you said you wanted 3 cents per word. This is what I write for. This is my portfolio. Call me if you're interested. But
Okay, thank you.
sure. Yes.
How do you create a portfolio for clients. I guess you just get permission in advance to use their books.
Some
or their
permission. So a large number of my jobs have been from clients sending my name on to other potential clients. They know other people that want to hire, and so that way they can say it's okay to discuss my work. Honestly, what I do is I write in a few different subgenres and in a few different voices. So I've taken excerpts from all of those different books and series, and I'm also happy to send manuscripts to people if they want. That was one of the things that early on was very good. I was just able to use my own work as my portfolio. You go first, then you.
So how do you determine deadlines? I've done a couple of ghostwriting jobs and did not anticipate we would do 7 rounds of revisions.
Okay, great.
So
I think that's a fair assumption.
so how do you predict how long something is going to take when you figure this much time for writing, this much time for 2 rounds of editing, and if there's still tweaks that need to be made and it drags it out? Because I would think that timeliness, adherence to deadlines is a really important quality. And then my other question would be, what credentials matter to clients the most? Like, how would you pitch yourself?
Yes. So in the case of the 7 rounds of revisions, that would definitely be a red flag for me on the client later. And it would be something that I would bring up if I were sending that client to another person in the future. Just to say, not to say don't work with this person, to say they and I didn't quite have a meeting of the minds on how many rounds of revisions, so talk with them about that before you make the contract. And be honest and upfront with the client when you first talk with a new one. Say, you know, I've had experiences in the past where projects dragged long, it wasn't good for me, it wasn't good for the client. Let's discuss what we want the schedule on draft to be and what we are willing to spend in time and money on revisions. In terms of pitching myself, this is an interesting thing. I can use my portfolio. I can say, these are things that I can do, which you can see because you can see my work publicly. I can also say, here's what you're gonna have to take on faith. These are the other genres I've ghostwritten in. Some of these books have gone on to be USA Today bestsellers. You'll have to believe me on that. If you can't believe me on that, I don't take it personally. I understand there's a lot of people out there that are grifting. And so simply being upfront and saying, this is the best I can tell you, I'm not gonna violate any NDAs to tell it to you, will usually bring, between that and my portfolio of my own work, will create a bit of trust with the client. And they can go away and say, okay, all of your work is in science fiction and fantasy, but you say you've done these subgenres of romance and thriller. Okay, we can talk about that, and even let's do an exploratory session on plotting and see how that works for us. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about process? So I'm an author. I wrote my first book, kind of on the second now, and realizing, you know, life is getting in the way a little bit. So I'm definitely thinking about working with a ghostwriter, but I'm just kind of curious about typical process, if there is a typical in terms of, you know, from the moment you start to.
Yep. So it would start with a few exploratory emails. Here's what I'm looking for. Is this something that interests you? Put out there early what you expect in terms of NDA versus co-writing. There are certainly arguments for being close with your ideas, but honestly, it's just better to be upfront, in my opinion. Once you've talked a little bit more about the general area, I would pitch the project itself, see if it resonates for them. Ask them honestly what range they need to work for. Ask about royalty splits. Ask about pay per word. Ask about a combo. See what works for you both. And then from there, say, okay, here is where my deadlines need to be. Here is what I am hoping for in terms of XYZ control. This is a series that I want to write, so I have these scenes that absolutely must be in there. I've been dreaming of them for years. Or just run with it. Talk about number of revisions. Talk about editing. And take it in baby steps with very clear communication. Do not be afraid, most of all, to say this is not working and leave. I know it feels like sunk time, but no time spent writing or working on a project is wasted, and it is better to walk away before everyone spends time they can't get back. So, yes.
Those are gonna be fine.
Okay. You first, and then.
So if it's not working out, do you have something in the contract that says at what point you can walk away at no cost, or is there a level of cost to walk away?
Yep, so what I'll do is generally, in most of my contracts, anyone can walk away at any time. Any deposits that have been paid are non-refundable. In terms of personal ethics, if they had paid me half of a book writing cost, we got 25% in and it wasn't working, I would probably return that. But when you talk, that is something you have to hash out with the client. For instance, a lot of people do an hourly rate. I loathe with a fiery passion keeping track of my time, so I do per word. But some people do hourly for that reason.
Okay.
So that's something you really do want to talk with the client about and just say, what happens if this isn't working? How do we make sure this is fair for both of us?
Right.
And go from there. And often what I'll do is I'll have a weekly invoice of words, and that way the client can tell me early on if the writing isn't working for them, and I can figure out early on it's not working for me and we've only paid for the work we've done.
Okay. And quick follow-up, what would you say the ranges are for ghostwriters? Are they pretty quick turnaround?
It entirely depends on the client. If you are able to write fast, 100% put that in your portfolio. That's part of why I was able to walk away from my finance job early, was I could churn out 10 to 12,000 words per day, which meant I could afford to work at the start for a penny per word. That was too low. Don't do that. But depending on your speed, you definitely want to highlight that.
Yeah, this would be in hiring.
Oh, and hiring.
Because I am so slow, and if I wanted help with the series.
Absolutely. Simply say up front, this is the time range I need, and or I don't care what your time range is if I like your writing, I just need to be able to plan around it. So tell me honestly what you can do, reliably tweak.
I have two questions, if that's
Sure,
okay.
that's fine.
So prior to word of mouth, if you're just getting started, where should people go to look for jobs? If you're going to be a ghostwriter, let me be particular.
Yep. Upwork is definitely one. If there are author worlds that you are interested in, I am a huge fan of emailing the author or using the contact on their site. First, look at the FAQ to make sure that that is something they have not addressed there, because you don't ever want to be that person. But if you also have a Twitter presence as an author, simply to say, does anyone know of someone looking for a contract writer? People are very happy to help out. So put your name out there. Don't be afraid to just shoot your shot, and go from there.
And then do you work on multiple projects at a time or just one?
Sometimes, honestly, was a lot simpler before the pandemic meant that my child was no longer in daycare. So everything has been a clusterfuck for the past 2 years. But I tried to work on one client project at a time and some of my stuff in the background. Yeah.
So I currently do a lot of ghostwriting for nonfiction, and it's in the realms of memoir and self-help and stuff, which includes, it's sort of a lengthy interview process.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all, and how the, right now I am doing, a per word pricing, but it doesn't really involve
It doesn't
the
capture
interview
that.
process.
Okay. One thing I will say is that I adjust my per word cost. So if someone wants a thriller or a politics heavy sci-fi or fantasy book, I will usually go for a higher per word cost. I am also not opposed to saying upfront, in terms of segments of pay, I expect to spend between 20 and 40 hours interviewing you and collating data to come up with a plan. Here is how much I expect to be paid for that. That's a perfectly reasonable thing, and if it's one of the things that helps keep you from coming out behind on a project,
Right.
it is good for your clients to know.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
any other questions? No. Okay, so for those of you who feel comfortable sharing, I completely understand if you are not. Who is here because they would like to look into hiring a ghostwriter or contract writer? Wonderful. Take a look around. Who's here because they're interested in ghostwriting or contract writing? Okay, we have 13 minutes left. Feel free to come talk to me and ask questions. Feel free to talk to each other and ask questions. If someone asked a question that resonated with you and you can answer it from a different author perspective than I have, or a different client perspective than I have, go talk to one another. This is so rare to have all these people in one room. And it's actually a manageable size of people. It's not like this is packed and it would be a giant hullabaloo. So, thank you so much for coming. I hope you make good connections. And the only other thing that I'm gonna make a quick plug for, one of my personal author things, is trying to get people to be less afraid of their data. I'm giving a talk on that tomorrow afternoon. So if you've looked at stuff like cost per click or advertising responsiveness, I'm like, I can't do that. You can. Come to my talk. I will help. Good to meet all of you. Thank you.